gentlemen, to share her absolutely beautiful healthcare story. Please welcome to the stage, Chrissy Natalie. Chrissy, come on.
Fantastic. I think just keep going.
Our Hiv can be waiting for the queue. Shh.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a little bit nervous. I'm not a public speaker, I'm just a mom, so. First, I just wanted to say thank you for allowing us to come in and share our story here today about my daughter, Leila. And just to hear about such an important cause. When I was asked to talk about our experience with Leila today, it helped me feel like a real sense of fulfillment and purpose. Going through such a tragedy with our little girl was by far the worst and one of the hardest times that we have ever had in our life as parents. And it's very difficult to come to terms with having faced something so difficult. And as a parent, you ask yourself, why? Why did this have to happen to our little girl? So in sharing her story and in speaking like this to people, it really helps to answer that question for us. Helps us to find a greater purpose in everything that we went through with her and everything that she's gone through. And in knowing that by sharing her story that other children that are in her situation can be helped, that medical advancements can be made, and that other families might have the chance to experience the same remarkable outcome that we did. So I'll take you back. We welcomed Leila Juliana as the youngest member of our family in February of 2008. She was born perfectly healthy. We spent the typical 3 days in the hospital and came home to get settled in. Little did we know it would only be a few hours later that our lives would change forever. That evening, Leila had finally fallen asleep, so my husband and I tried to get a little rest. But about an hour later, I woke up suddenly with a knot in my stomach. So I went and checked on the baby, of course. And as soon as I looked at her, she looked pale, she looked lifeless, and I knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. I picked her up, and her arms and legs just flung back. So I placed my finger under her nose, realized very quickly that she was not breathing. Screamed to wake my husband. We checked for a pulse. There was not one. I raced to grab the phone, call 911, while we got her on the floor to prepare to start infant CPR. We had fortunately taken a refresher CPR course when each of our children was born, so we were pretty familiar with it. But the 911 operator kind of walked us through each step. After what seemed like forever, but was actually only about 12 minutes, the paramedics arrived. One of the firefighters scooped Leila up in his arms and basically just rushed out to the ambulance. And they continued to resuscitate her on the 15-minute ambulance ride to the hospital. In my mind, it seemed like in just the blink of an eye, we basically went from being in our living room surrounded by teddy bears and balloons and celebrating the birth of our baby girl to sobbing in an emergency room and waiting to hear if she was even still alive. The doctors eventually came out and they told us that Leila had basically suffered a full cardiac arrest in her sleep. When we arrived at the hospital, she had what they called pulseless electrical activity. I remember the doctor telling us that looking at her and seeing how little she was, they couldn't bear to stop working on her. So they actually worked on her for 21 minutes until they finally got her heartbeat back. But she was still far from out of the woods. Leila was placed on advanced life support. Machines were keeping her alive. The pediatric resources at that hospital were not very good, so despite the fact that it would be very risky to transport her, they did bring us to another facility. Once we were settled in at the PICU, the doctors sat us down to tell us their plan. They explained that there was a new cutting-edge treatment for children like Leila who had lost a significant amount of oxygen called newborn brain cooling. So they told us about the process and how they would basically induce a coma, and they would cool her entire body. They said that this would help slow down the return of oxygen to her brain and hopefully reduce the amount of brain damage that she would sustain. In the past, whenever I thought of doctors, I always thought of experts who knew everything there was to know about medicine. So it was pretty concerning at first to see them referencing medical journals and Googling how they were going to take care of our daughter to try to find other cases around the world like Leila's. It was scary realizing that her medical team didn't have extensive experience doing this in the past, and they were preparing to use such an experimental technique. But at this point, we were desperate. We were desperate for any measures to be taken to somehow save her life. So we felt fortunate that they were even willing to attempt the treatment. So Leila was placed into a coma, and they administered the cooling technique. When the treatment was done, they removed the coma medications, but Leila did not regain consciousness. She was still breathing through a ventilator. She was being fed through a feeding tube. She was maxed out on blood pressure medications and having her body temperature maintained all artificially. She had no response to pain or light or sound, and she was still completely unresponsive. Every single day, the neurologist would come in and perform another EEG, and every time it would come back with no brain activity. So over a week went by with 8 EEGs, and the same devastating results every time. And at that point, the doctors began suggesting that we think about removing Leila's life support. We really couldn't even begin to consider that option without more testing, so they were finally able to get her to an MRI. We thought the results might at least give us some hope, anything, that things might be okay, but we were crushed again. The results showed extensive, irreversible brain damage throughout the cortex of her brain down to her brainstem. So at this point, we had test after test, seemed to show no signs of any recovery for Leila at all. She was still unresponsive, her brainstem wasn't performing at all on its own, and it seemed like our options were running out. But we decided to sleep on it before we made any more decisions. And that night, I had this little vision of Leila as a toddler, and everything, she was just totally okay, running around, she had a little pink dress, and I just woke up that next morning with the feeling of clarity and a real sense of peace that I hadn't really felt until that moment. We basically asked the doctors if we could attempt to wean Leila's life support. And they agreed. The team said that was fine, but they also prepared us for the outcome that they anticipated. And they told us Leila will probably take her last breaths during this weaning process. So the hospital clergy came down to pray with us. And a grief support group presented us with a little pink gown and a blanket for Leila to pass away in. They had us bring in our family members and her siblings and everyone to say their goodbyes. And they slowly started weaning her support. And through every single stage, Leila basically showed us what a fighter she was destined to be. They adjusted her ventilator little by little when her little body began taking over. Every time the settings were lowered, there was another knot in my stomach and another hurdle for Leila to have to get over. But she kept defying the odds, and before we knew it, she was breathing on her own. The doctors were amazed, but they said that Leila's long-term prognosis was still not looking good. She had survived off the life support against medical odds, but they prepared us for a pretty grave outcome. Leila would likely remain in a vegetative state indefinitely. From the looks of her muscle movements and how much oxygen she had lost, they expected that she would have severe cerebral palsy. She'd probably never walk or talk, and they said she may not even know who we were. We started to question whether we had made the right decisions with her medical care, but those thoughts were overcome by the fact that Leila had already surprised us at every single stage of this ordeal with her strength and her will. So we had no doubt that she continues to shock us all, and that's exactly what she did. In the weeks that followed, Leila finally opened her eyes. She started becoming more alert to her surroundings. Her body slowly took over all of its basic functions, and eventually they were ready to send us home. Leila would be leaving with oxygen tanks, a feeding tube, plans for a considerable amount of ongoing therapy. And like any parent, naturally, we were fearful of the unknown, but we were very happy to be bringing her home and kind of getting used to our new normal and whatever that would be for her future. Leila made it very easy for us to stay positive. She continued to defeat the odds month after month. We started therapy and tried to give her every tool we could think of to help with her recovery. Although she was fairly late hitting the typical baby milestone, she was still reaching them just in her own time. She started rolling over and sitting up, showed us that, she ditched her feeding tube, and then she was able to start eating normally. She began taking steps with a medical walker, and then at just over a year and a half old, we watched as Leila took her first independent steps on her own. Leila is now 11 years old. She's a rising 5th grader this fall. I won't say that the last decade has been easy for any of us, or for Leila, because it certainly hasn't. And Leila has had her challenges to face in her childhood that most children do not have to face. She wears some ankle orthotics under her shoes because she does have mild cerebral palsy. She gets some assistance at school for some minor developmental delays, and she struggles with certain things on her own, like short-term memory. But overall, we feel like the luckiest and most blessed family on earth to have her here with us. In a perfect world, no child would ever have to struggle with a disability. And as a mother, the last thing you want is to see your own child struggle. But if there was a child who could face it day after day and take it like such a true champion, it is Leila. Every day, this little girl wakes up with the biggest smile. She's ready to face the world and overcome every challenge that comes her way. Her genuine love for life and her positivity are an inspiration to me and to everyone that she meets. I think most children have a positive outlook on life, but Leila has this special superpower that gives her this unbelievable amount of strength and will and perseverance to conquer every challenge that comes her way. I truly believe that everything that happens in our lives happens for a reason. Had there not been research that was done on brain cooling before this ordeal happened with Leila, this cutting-edge treatment would not have been an option for us, and things probably would have turned out very, very differently. I have no doubt that everyone being here today and learning ways to further this research and bringing the newest medical advancements to the public is going to save more lives, just like Leila's. Before we came here, I explained to Leila how her story is going to save lots of other little boys and girls, just like her, and how I am proud to be the mommy of such a little hero. So I genuinely hope that every single one of you will consider helping to continue this mission of saving children's lives and help Leila continue to be the little superhero that I know that she is. So I could not be more proud to introduce you to my special little miracle, my daughter, Leila Natalini.